So we know that he has written a wonderful book, Buddha and his Dhamma. So Buddha and his Dhamma is a very special book in the sense that if you read this book, you will come to know about Buddha, everything about Buddha, his philosophy, his life, his vision, and how he was different from other religious leaders. So in today's discussion, today's lecture, two, three things would be taken into account. And the focal point of today's discussion would be Dhamma. What is Dhamma? And in this discussion, we will not only discuss what is Dhamma, but at the same time, we will be discussing what is that which is not Dhamma, and how can this Dhamma be taken to an universal level. So that third stage is called Sadhamma. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar has categorically spoken about these three aspects of Dhamma in his book Buddha and his Dhamma. So, and how, and another aspect I will be touching here is how is it different from religion? And this aspect has also been taken by Baba Sahib Ambedkar in his book, in this book. So, we know that he was born in a family. The family was royal family in the sense that during that time we had certain sanghas, certain republics. We had certain Mahajanpadas as well. But this Sakyas of Kapilavastu was not monarchical state. It was a republic. It was a sangha. So it was by chance that during Siddhartha's birth, Buddha's birth, his father was the Raja, the king of that area. So he was born in that family, and at the time of his birth, many sages came, and one Asita, and a very important spiritual person came there, and he predicted that this boy would either become Chakravarti Samrat if he adopts a householder life, and if he leaves this house, then he would become a monk, and he would give shelter to many people who are suffering from various dukkhas and many problems. He would remove many problems of millions of the people. So, keeping that prediction of Asita in mind, Father tried to give all types of luxuries to Buddha. But we know that all luxuries, and in fact, he was, the Shuddhodhan, his father, got constructed many houses for him, one for winter season, one for rainy season, another for winters and summer season. But all these luxuries, and even he got married to most beautiful girl of the area, Yashodhara, who was his relative as well. But nothing could stop him taking parivraja. Though the reason of parivraja, here in this book we find that reason of parivraja of Buddha is different. Why did he take sannyas? Why did he take monkhood, that life? The reason given by Baba Sahib Ambedkar is different. But reason is not important. Important is his spirituality, his morality, his dhamma. So basically, and not only that, not only his life, the spiritual background, but at the same time, he was given all types of teachings, Veda, Vedangas. So there was a one teacher, Sabametta. Sabametta basically gave all teachings of Veda, Upanishad, and Vedanga. And other teacher, Bharadwaj. Bharadwaj was having ashram in Kapilavastu only. So he taught him how to meditate, how to concentrate. So with this background, when he took sannyas, when he took a parivraja, he decided to establish not as a religion, not a new religion. Rather, he decided to especially after perfection, because that time he had a dilemma whether whatever I have realized, should I preach it or not? Should I keep it for my salvation? Because the dilemma was natural, because people were loaded with their own imperfections, with their own presuppositions. People were of the view that this universe is being created by God or some supernatural agency, with so many presuppositions, religious and spiritual presuppositions. How would it be possible to teach them that whatever I have realized? So out of dilemma, and there is another story that another person came from Brahmalok, and he persuaded Buddha to teach whatever, because the knowledge is universal, that must be made universal, that cannot be personal. So after realization, uh, whatever he taught, whatever he realized and that he taught is called Dhamma. So basically, we will be discussing that Dhamma aspect and how is it different from religion, the modern day religion. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, basically, in his book, he explains this Dhamma in a very wonderful way. Because first of all, he raises certain questions whether Buddha speak spoke about social messages like social virtues like equality, liberty, justice. Because if we wish to analyze any religion or dharma in 21st century, or say in late 20th century or late 19th century, it should be done on the basis of rationality only, on the basis of certain criterions which are universal. Modern day morality and modern day criterions of society, criterion of morality in society are equality, liberty, justice, fraternity. These are wonderful ideas, and from these parameters, Baba Sahib Ambedkar tried to analyze Buddha's Dhamma. And he asked the question whether these social messages or these virtues and these moralities are there in Buddha's Dhamma. Baba Sahib concludes that yes, these messages are there, but some commentators basically did not pay attention to these messages. So basically, his analysis of Buddha, his analysis of Dhamma is based on, or was based on, these virtues, these universal virtues. These virtues are equality, liberty, fraternity, humanity, rational and other rational criteria. So on the basis of these virtues, he tried to analyze Dhamma. And then after reading various suttas of Buddha's life, suttas means he on any particular topic, he spoke about this issue, that issue, ego, sexuality, many problems he discussed differently. And on the basis of those suttas, he concluded that this is Dhamma. Now, what are the characteristics of Dhamma? Baba Sahib Ambedkar uh, gives a wonderful analysis of this. Basically, generally, if you read other religions, if you read our other religions, no need to name this or that religion, we find that our religions are more God centric. Our religions are more supernatural, focusing on more on supernatural realities. But Buddha says the first characteristic of this Dhamma is that Dhamma is uh, that which gives you perfection of mind, body, and speech. This is the first characteristic. First characteristic of Dhamma is that which gives you perfection of mind, speech, and body. What is the meaning of perfection of body? Means you should not kill anybody. Perfection of mind means that mind should be free from ashavas, free from passions. Another characteristic, and this perfection of mind basically includes the Nibbana. Here, the discussion of Nibbana is very important, because this is a Nibbana or salvation. In English, if we try to translate, though this translation is not perfect, but if we compare other religions and we try to see their view on salvation, most of them are having salvation which is otherworldly, after death, or you can say that which is associated with God as well. But here, Nibbana is not anything which is already there. Nibbana is getting rid of these passions, the fetters of passions. He compared these passions with fire. He says, fire of passion, fire of sorrow, fire of grief, fire of despair. The world is burning with this fire of these various emotions. So Nibbana is at personal level. Nibbana is basically to get rid of such passions. These passions are creating problem. For example, if greed is there, that greed will proceed further to any social level as well. If ego is there, that ego can lead to other social problems. So he tried to focus on those passions which are the root causes of all types of evils. So nibbana is extinction of all desires. It's not the extinction of desire as such, rather is a term in modern psychology. We call it emotional intelligence. So Buddha, I personally think Buddha was the first person who talked about, who categorically defined emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is that term in which we observe our emotions. We are not in control of our emotions. Our passions are not controller of my life. Our reasoning is very well handling these emotions. So Buddha talked about that emotional intelligence at permanent level in nibbana. There are many people who say the nibbana is not possible in this life, because Buddha himself talked about. But Buddha, according to Baba Sahib Ambedkar, Buddha categorically mentioned a distinction between nibbana and parinibbana. He says in this life, nibbana is something like, we should think about these, getting rid of these fetters, and parinibbana is when after death everything comes to an end and no rebirth. So basically, this dhamma is dhamma is about perfection of mind, speech, and body. Another characteristic of this is to give up craving is dhamma. The second characteristic Baba Sahab says that to give up craving is dhamma. We have different cravings. We have passions. These passions incite us, these passions ignite us to have this or that craving, that I should have this house, I should have that house, I should have this much amount of money. These many cravings actually are never satisfactory. They are never satisfied. So if they are never satisfied, uh, what happens? The human being keeps on roaming around these cravings and ultimately dies. So he says that dhamma is that which can stop your craving. He says that another characteristic of dhamma is that the if it gives you an understanding that all compound things, all composite things of this world are momentary, are impermanent. Though the term momentary was not used by Buddha, he used the term impermanence. Later Buddhist philosophers translated it as momentary, but everything is impermanent. Now, what was the reason to call every compound thing impermanent? The main reason behind Buddha's statement was so that we are not attached to worldly things. Less and less attachment. We know that attachment is sorry. We know that attachment is the mother of pleasure and pain both. If attachment is not there, I can never get pleasure, nor can I get pain. If pleasure is there, pain is bound to be there, because they both are sisters of daughters of the attachment only. So Buddha's intention behind making this statement that everything is impermanent was so that we are not attached to these worldly things. Now, what is other characteristic of that spiritual world order? We know that in our religions, our so-called religions, our different religions, we have God in the center of spiritual world order. That God created this universe, and whatever we do is the result is being given by, though karma is there, but result is being given by God, and sometimes grace becomes very important. So in our different religions, in our various religions, we find that God is in the center of a spiritual world order. But Buddha here makes a different declaration. He says that it is not God. Actually, it is karma, which is the instrumental in making a spiritual world order. Because whatever we the moral order cannot be decided by any supernatural agency. Whatever we do, we reap the fruit of that. The theory of karma, in Indian philosophy has two aspects. Some philosophers associate it with God, that whatever we do on the basis of that power, God gives us a result. But Buddha detached this theory of karma from any supernatural agency, that the karma is more than enough, or karma is more powerful. He would say that karma is more than sufficient to give us a result. So karma is in the center of this spiritual world order. It is not any supernatural agency. So we can conclude what is dhamma according to Buddha. Dhamma is that which teaches us middle path, which teaches us morality. And which type of morality? That morality which is not supernatural, that morality which is not otherworldly, that morality which is this worldly, or in modern terms we can say secular morality. Secular in true sense, not in other sense. Secular, so Buddha can be considered the true secular person of this world, or first secular human being of this world, a spiritual leader of this world. So that which teaches us morality, that which teaches us middle path, why did he discuss that? Any type of extreme, either you go to this side or that side. In case of morality also, he says the middle path must be adopted. There were many spiritual leaders during his time. Some people say that there were 64 spiritual schools, philosophical schools during, and one school was related to Mahavir as well, Jainism. So that was one extreme, that you give up everything, and other extreme was you can say the materialistic extreme. So Buddha avoided both extremes and said that we have to adopt a middle path. So that middle path, following of that middle path is Dhamma. It is not something supernatural. It is not something. So basically, we can say Dhamma is morality centric. And this morality is not supernatural. Morality is not otherworldly. This morality is this worldly. Morality is universal in nature. Now, the, because discussion of Dhamma would be incomplete if we do not discuss certain other problems. Because we have many confusions about Dhamma and religion. So Buddha clarified in this book only, Baba Sahab clarifies it, that there are certain things, certain misconceptions about Dhamma. So Buddha clarifies through his various suttas. He clarifies what is not Dhamma. What is Dhamma? We have discussed. So Dhamma is basically the morality. Dhamma is eightfold path. Dhamma is Dwadasa Chakra, realization of impermanence, realization of, or you can say realization of the fact that karma is the center of spiritual world order. So it was also required to know what is not Dhamma. So Baba Sahab categorizes that in what is Adhamma. Adhamma is that which is not Dhamma. So the first characteristic, he says, the belief in supernatural is not Dhamma. Belief in supernatural. We know that in Buddhism, there is no, uh, there is no supernatural agency. And that supernatural agency is missing in Buddhism. So if anybody believes in any supernatural agency, be it God, be it supernatural soul, that in Buddhism, Jainism, we do not have a God, but they have supernatural Atma, that the same Atma becomes Paramatma after perfection. So the first characteristic Baba Sahab says that which is supernatural cannot be included in Dhamma. The second characteristic of this Adhamma, that which is not Dhamma, is the realization of the fact that God is not the essential characteristic or essential part of Dhamma. We know that, in fact, this is the characteristic of Indian philosophy as well. Out of 9 great schools of Indian philosophy, you'd be surprised to know that merely one or two believed in God, and that God is totally different from our God of Western countries, Western religion, Western philosophy. Here, morality, here, dharma is not God centric. Here, it is morality centric. So, the thing is, what does Buddha say? Buddha says that you may or may not believe in God. That is not important. In Dhamma, God is not God is not the central value. So belief, uh, basically, belief in any supernatural agency, belief in any God cannot be included in Dhamma, because he says that belief in God or belief in any supernatural agency basically will restrict you, will stop you for doing moral things. Other characteristic of adhamma, he says, other characteristic of adhamma is that belief in any supernatural or permanent or eternal soul. He gave a simile of this statement or this belief by saying that believing in soul, in eternal soul, is like like falling in love with a girl of a kingdom, uh, princess of a kingdom, who is yet to be born, who is not yet born, जिसका भी जन्म ही नहीं हुआ है, ऐसी ही सुंदरी के प्रेम में पड़ जाना. So he says this belief in any supernatural agencies or supernatural soul is not a part of Dhamma. So he gave a theory of anatta. Anatta, he says, there is no permanent soul, and whatever consciousness or whatever human being is there, it is not because of any permanent soul. He says it is because of. He talked about, Roop Khand and Naam Khand. Roop Khand and Naam Khand means there are human being is a composition of various sanskaras, various Roop, Vedana, Sangya, Sanskar. These five elements are there. Some are conscious, some are unconscious. But every element, everything, every aspect is impermanent. So these things are not, we can say, are not Dhamma. Belief in another aspect of Dhamma, he says, Adhamma, he says, that belief in any sacrifice. Sacrifice can be Nitya, can be Naimittik in so-called Brahmanic religion. Baba Sahib Ambedkar says that different sacrifices are there. So belief in sacrifice is Adhamma. And belief in any speculative agency also, because belief in God, belief in any supernatural agency, as Charvak said later on, that are based on this or that inference or speculation. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar says that anything which is based on, if anything is there in any religion, which is based on speculation, then definitely it is not Dhamma. And other important thing he talks about Dhamma is that to think that the book of Dhamma, reading books of Dhamma is not Dhamma. There are many people in our different religions who think that for them particular book becomes very important. Somebody says that this book is the revelation of God, this book is written by God or revealed by God through rishis, through this or that. So he says any type of reading of book is not a dhamma. Books can be helpful, but reading books cannot be dhamma. These are mere instruments. Otherwise, if we start taking these books as everything of dhamma, then they becomes burden on us. So he says, and also he's of the view that everything, whatever a statement, what reason we give in favor of our philosophical and religious doctrine must be supported by reasoning, and that reasoning must be examined, re-examined. So no book is infallible. Like, there are many people who say that this book is written by God, so infallible, like, cannot be failed. Whatever is written is permanent. Now, so these are certain fetters, certain problems which stops any religion becoming Dhamma, so Baba Sahib Ambedkar termed them as Adhamma. He said they are Adhamma. Now, how can we make this Dhamma? And this discussion is very important, keeping present day context in mind. That how can we make this Dhamma? How can we take this Dhamma to universal level? Because morality, if it is restricted, karma, if it is restricted, cannot be working, like cannot work properly. Because morality and rationality, these two things, these two qualities work only when universality is there. So how can we take this Dhamma to universal level? That discussion we find in third category, which is called Sadadhamma. Sadadhamma. How can we take this Dhamma to Sadadhamma level? So basically, he says uh, we can take this Dhamma to Sadadhamma level by removing or cleansing the mind of impurities. That impurities of mind are not only passions, impurities of mind are also those impurities, narrow boundaries of ideas, narrow isms of ideas, because isms create a problem that this is the reality, only this is the way. So all impurities, all narrowness must be removed. Then that Dhamma would reach to higher level, that is Sadhamma. And any Dhamma which teaches the world, which establishes the world a kingdom of righteousness or kingdom of morality, any Dhamma which establishes kingdom of morality, that would become we can say Sadhamma. And it is possible by Panchashila, it is possible by Ashtanga Marg. This is, but these are not only the ways. Buddha never said that only these are the paths. You can take help from them, but he did not say this is the path. This is a path, but this is not the path. Now, how can we make, he says that we can make this Dhamma Sadhamma, we can take this level, this Dhamma to Sadhamma level if we make it open for everybody. We know that our different religions are having certain this or that restriction. So these restrictions are creating problem. In some religions, particular book was not allowed for particular section. In other religions, white or black problem was there. In other people, Shia and Sunni problem was there. So Buddha says, until and unless it is open to everybody, it cannot be considered, it cannot be taken to Sadhamma level. And other characteristic, which is that he uses the term pradanya. Pradanya is insight. Pradanya is insight. To take this Dhamma to Sadhamma level, he says we need to develop insight. Mere knowledge is not sufficient. Mere information is not sufficient. We must develop insight, pradanya, or wisdom, you can say. But this wisdom itself is not sufficient. He says that to turn this Dhamma to Sadhamma level, we must develop Maitri in us. Maitri in us. So Maitri is universal friendliness. Universal friendliness. So, and it should develop Karuna as well. He says that that Dhamma which leads Karuna, which develops Karuna in us, which is Maitri in us, so that Maitri or Karuna, he makes a distinction. He says mere Karuna, compassion is not sufficient, because he says compassion is for human beings only. Whereas Maitri is for everybody. Like take it for even animals, all sentient beings, all trees even. So Maitri is also very important. And this Karuna and Maitri must be reflected in our Shila, in our practice, in our behavior. So Maitri insight, Maitri Karuna behavior. These terms are very important in making any particular religion, any particular Dhamma as Sadhamma. He says, and keeping our environmental problems in mind, we can think that this concept of Maitri and Karuna is very important in the sense that we are facing many environmental problems there. And in fact, we know that this particular virus came from particular uh, mammal, particular animal. And because we do not pay attention to those animals, we do not have Maitri, we do not have compassion for others. So as soon as we develop that compassion, that Maitri for other animals, other trees and everything, many environmental problems would be removed. So, and other characteristic, he says, other requirement of Dhamma to become Sadadhamma is that it must remove all restrictions, all barriers between men and men. We know that we have many barriers in our society, in our country. We have many barriers, not only in our country, all over the world. We have different types of barriers. Some are visible, some are invisible. So those barriers are creating problem. So if Dhamma can become Sadhamma only if it removes all types of barriers. It cannot say that this is restricted to this group of people, this is restricted to rich people, this is restricted to uh, mm, this people of this region only, or this caste or this religion. It should be open for everybody. If breaks all the restrictions, all the barriers, then this Dhamma would reach to the level of Sadhamma. And also it equality between men and men. All types of inequalities must be removed. So here we find that in his discussion of Dhamma, Baba Sahib Ambedkar, through this book, Buddha and his Dhamma, or we can say Buddha through Baba Sahib Ambedkar, says that Dhamma is morality based. Dhamma is not that which restricts us. Dhamma is not which creates problem in us. Dhamma is not that which gives us many problems, internal problems. So Dhamma is something internal. Dhamma is related to morality. We can say it is morality centric. Now, in this context, Baba Sahib Ambedkar makes a distinction between religion and dharma. He says religion and dharma are not same. They are two different categories. Categorically, he says that dhamma is morality centric, and the nature of morality is universal, whereas religion is God centric. If you keep our Islam, our Christianity, and some sects of our Hinduism, we find that they start with God, that God created this universe, and out of so many things, in so many things, God created, and basically, morality is there. It does not mean morality is not there in our other religions. Morality is there, but there God is in the center. Morality is secondary. If there is a fight between morality and God, then definitely God would be taken into account. So God-centric religion is the term religion. Specifically, he was referring Western European category religion. He says that religion is God-centric, whereas Dhamma is morality-centric. And here Buddha's Dhamma is everything of morality. And this morality is universal. The nature of morality in religion is related to God, that it is bound to particular sect, particular book, particular order, because that morality is being given by supernatural agency. For example, in our Quran Sharif, in our Bible, in our this or that particular book, we can say that morality is being given by God directly, and there is no provision of any change. If it is being given by God, how can there be change? How can there be changeability in that order? But Buddha says the morality is not related to any supernatural agency. It is universal. It is because in our religion we don't have any freedom as far as morality is concerned, because it is bound, it is related to any god. So if it is related to any god, how can there be freedom to change it? But in Dhamma, there is a freedom, because this morality has come out of human experiences. And if human experiences and human rationality says something else, according to need of the society, according to need of the situation, definitely we can make required changes in that. The freedom is there. So basically, dhamma and morality, dhamma and religion, both are not exactly same. They are not contradictory. Baba Sahib Ambedkar says that they are not contradictory, but they are not exactly same. Now, so basically, in his book, Baba Sahib Ambedkar is trying to say that we should, even if we wish to become a dharmic person, if we wish to become a person of morality, then we must adopt the morality, we must adopt the dhamma, which is not based on any supernatural agency, which is based on our karma, which is based on equality, which is based on liberty, which that which spreads equality, liberty, fraternity. And those qualities are very much there in Dhamma. He does not say, Buddha himself did not say that Dhamma is Buddhism. Buddhism is a later term developed by followers, but he says Dhamma because uh, followers requested him to choose any successor. He denied, he said the Dhamma would be the successor, because I did not come here to establish a new religion. I came here to teach Dhamma. So basically, Dhamma is being taught by, and Dhamma means that morality which spreads equality, which spreads liberty, fraternity, justice, social harmony, and which removes all types of. So basically, this Dhamma works at two levels. The first level of Dhamma is internal. And this level of Dhamma, which is internal, is very much important and primary. At internal level, it deals with uh, removing all the impurities of mind, all the passions of mind, because we are in the grip of, if we are in the grip of this or that passion, our reasoning will not work. A Western philosopher, Hume, said that reason is the handmaid of passions. When we are in the grip of these passions, our uh, rationality does not work. In Gita also, Krishna says that when Kam and Krodha is controlling you, your rationality, you will not work, and you will not be in position to work rationally. So Buddha's effort was to make you emotionally intelligent person, emotionally intelligent person who can observe these passions, who knows how that this passion has entered in my body. This passion is trying to control me. So this knowledge is must, and he developed many methods, many meditation techniques for it. Those meditation techniques can be divided into two groups, samatha and vipassana. So Buddha was of the view that Dhamma works at internal level first. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar says that this Dhamma not only works at internal level only. Baba Sahib says that this Dhamma can, or Buddha himself talked about this Dhamma taking to social level. He had social messages as well. He tried to remove many problems of inequality, injustice. So at social level, he says that which removes all the restrictions, that which removes all the boundaries, all the barriers, all caste-based problems, inborn inequalities, all inequalities are removed, all injustice are, because if a person is perfect, how can he go for injustice? How can he go for inequality? So this Dhamma basically is working at two level. Internal level, it makes Dhamma a universal Dhamma. It is not related to any particular group, particular caste. It is open for everybody. And the second point, which is very important, that this Dhamma is not same as religion. We know religion is God-centric, Dhamma is morality-centric. It makes, like existential philosophers of Western countries, it makes us the maker of our own destiny. I would say that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has wonderfully, I have already read many books of Buddhism, about Buddha's life, about Buddha's philosophy. But I would say this is the best book about Buddhism. I would recommend everybody that please read this book. This is really wonderful in the sense the way he has explained. He can have different views about his sannyas, but the way he has explained everything, it is really wonderful English, wonderful way of explanation and everything. If you read this book, you would come to know, as if like you would start roaming in Buddhist era, that era when Buddha was alive. So with these words, I would again say my thanks to Ambedkar International Center. I would again extend my thankfulness to the director of Ambedkar International Center, Dr. Trivedi ji, Dr. Gulati ji. Really thankful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aditya, for this wonderful and very simple, philosophical lecture. Generally, when we hear a man of philosophy, it is very difficult to cognize the words. But it was, I mean, interesting on my part even to understand these simple terminologies of Buddha and Dhamma. In fact, it tempts me to read the book, though I read it a couple of years back, but now I would read it again. So if we have certain questions, we can post it on chat box, and thereafter this QA session, we would like to wind up this lecture of today. So do we have any questions? uh, okay, otherwise you can Dr. Ramesh Babu Para, you can just post your question in chat box, because I have deliberately unmuted you. Chalo, anyways, I have muted you. Ramesh Para. Dr. Ramesh Babu Para is a postdoctoral fellowship of Dr. Ambedkar International Center. So he'll asking one question. Yeah, Ramesh.
Hello, sir. It's a really fascinating lecture on Buddha and Dharma. So I have a small query, sir, regarding the Ambedkar's Buddha Bharat and Navayana. What it actually relates to the entire Dharma, that inside morality, that Dharma, inside as well as the social level, how it works through this Navayana and Prabhuddha Bharat.
Right. See, when Baba Sahib Ambedkar coined this term Navayana, Neo Buddhism, basically, he did not say anything against Buddha, but definitely he had certain reservations, certain differences from Buddhist philosophers, because whatever Buddha said was not written that time. Later on, after first council, basically he gives in this book he says that Kashyapa presided over the first council after Buddha's death, and he asked one type of question from one disciple, say from Anand, other type of question he asked from this person, but he did not ask any question related to his life. So whatever we get is based on primarily based on that council. After that, many literature came. So when Baba Sahib Ambedkar was there, by that time many versions of Buddhism were there, right? So we know that shunyata, he has mentioned about shunyavad as well. We have many schools of Buddhism. 64 5 schools of Buddhism developed after Buddha's death gradually. So we can say that he had certain reservations with various interpretations. For example, there are certain people who say that for Arya Satya, for Arya Satya, Baba Sahib Ambedkar says that Buddha never talked about Arya Satya in that way in which it is taught. It is in which it is taught in West. So he says actually he discussed those issues. He was not that pessimistic, because if life is full of suffering, then matter comes to an end, right? But Buddha basically discussed about suffering because of passions. So this cannot be the first statement. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar had a reservation over this four noble truths categorically, though he discussed everything in a particular book and he accepted. So, and not only that, Buddha's time and say 19th century time or 20th century time, there is a huge gap of say 2500 years. Definitely needs are were different. Definitely requirements were different. So keeping those needs and requirements in mind, Baba Sahab established, or you can say, formed a new school which can be considered Neo-Buddhism. You must be aware of American school, engaged Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism again is like keeping keeping modern needs and modern problems in mind, how to translate Buddhist philosophy in modern times so that it becomes practical. So India's requirements, India's problems were unique. We know that we have so many problems of caste and regionalism, and many problems are there. And to tackle those problems, it was must to give a new cloth to Buddhism. So that new cloth, the Buddhism in new cloth is Neo-Buddhism. It is not basically different from, but yes, Neo-Buddhism focuses more on social aspect, more on social aspect, that inequalities, this, if you wish to follow Dhamma at your home or at personal level, yes, it is for you. But he talked more about social aspect. So Neo-Buddhism really focuses more on external aspect, that it should not remain confined only in house. It must come out. It must be reflected in society. If Karuna and Maitri is there, how can you exploit your own brothers and sisters? How can you say that they are inferior or you are superior? This is not possible. So basically, he wanted to make this Buddhism, I should not say Buddhism, this Buddhatva, established in society, so that all sufferings, all social inequalities, or because as I told you that some interpreters did not pay attention to social questions. So basically, Baba Sahib Ambedkar brought those social questions, equality, liberty, from various suttas of Buddha's philosophy out. So in that way, it was Neo-Buddhism. It was Navayan, you can say.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Aditya. I can see one person raising his hand, Dr. Ravi Kumar. Is there any question? If there is a question, I can unmute you. Yeah, Dr. Ravi Kumar. Dr. Ravi Kumar, is there any question from your side? Fine. So now I will request Dr. Devinder to extend word of thanks. He is my colleague in Dr. Ambedkar International Center. Dr. Devinder, please.
Thank you, Varun, and thank you, Dr. Aditya. It's a really wonderful and enlightening lecture. And before the vote of thanks, with your due permission, if you allow me, I want to add just two things to your lecture as a footnote. As a footnote,
and it would be good for me as well.
Thank you so much. Actually, Dhamma, he emphasizes upon Nirvana also, which is very important part in what is Dhamma. So Nirvana, as per Dr. Ambedkar and as per Buddha, what Dr. Ambedkar has collected from Buddha's teachings, Nirvana means not something which can be gained after death. Okay, in all the religions, almost everywhere in any corner of the world, people think you get salvation after death. But Buddha says that you can get salvation even in this life if you purify yourself, your body, your mind, your heart, your thought, everything. If you get yourself purified, it means that is the position of Nirvana, and which can be attained through Vipassana and so many other means which he has described in this book. So this is what I wanted to add
thank
to
you
your information, but to the information to my colleagues and my scholars. Secondly,
right.
Yeah, please.
Basically, when I discussed Nibbana and Parinibbana,
yeah.
So I discussed that, but I'm thankful to you that you explain it in a wonderful way.
And secondly, what is Sadhamma? He emphasizes upon again purity. Okay, he says that of course, learning all these things, getting yourself purified and becoming friendly to each other, he says that Maitri is above all. And above Maitri is the purity. If you are pure and your purity is visible to the world, then it means you are following the path of Buddha, and this is called Sadhamma. So thank you so much. I'm really thankful to you that you came, you spared some time, and you explained Dhamma, Sadhamma, and Adhamma, which is really needed in this time because we are suffering. And
Definitely.
in this pandemic, actually, we are suffering a sort of mental trauma. Everybody
Right.
has lost the hope of life, and we have lost so many things. We are all, almost afraid of getting caught by this virus. But these type of lectures, as you know, that there are 9 philosophical schools. But if we read Vedanta and Upanishads, so Dr. Ambedkar says that Upanishads, they are really very close to my Dhamma, but
Yeah.
on one point it is different, because they again establish the empire of the unseen entity. But
Right.
now what I want to say to people, that first learn, know, and then try to conclude. But I'm not going to command that this is absolutely right
Just
what I say.
one line comment. I wish to add one information.
Yeah, please, please.
Actually, I used to teach one article of what use these Upanishads are. Wonderfully, Baba Sahib Ambedkar has raised question that such a wonderful philosophy, and but it is not being implemented at social front. What is the
Exactly.
use of this wonderful philosophy of non-duality if
Yeah.
we have so many inequalities and so many discriminations at ground level? So basically, he was against ritualistic aspect of so-called Brahmanism more ritualistic and that which was related to caste and all. Definitely, he had positive thinking about Upanishads, especially Upanishads, which talks about non-difference. So, thank you very much, Dr. Ravi ji. Thank you very much, Dr. Varun sir, and thank you very much, Director sir. Thank you very much, Ambedkar International Center, and
So
all the
on
all the
behalf of Dr. Ambedkar International Center, I must extend my thank you to everybody, all the technical team, all our scholars, everybody who joined this meeting, and special thank to my colleague Varun, director, and the most important thank you to Dr. Adit, who spared some time and enlightened us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Devinder. Before we end the meeting, I would just say that for next lecture, we'll be meeting on 14th May 2020. This lecture will be on Dr. Ambedkar's Bharat Katha, Narratives of the Nation, some reflections by Professor Sudhir Kumar from Punjab University. So I would request you to join that lecture also. It's a weekly now series, so all of you just sitting at home now can change your mood by joining these lectures. Thank you so much. With this, I end this meeting. Thanks.
thank you.